Every town has that house. The one whispered about by children on their way home from school. The one parents warn their kids to stay away from. In my town, it was the old mansion on Thornhill Road. No one had lived there for over 50 years, and no one dared to go near it, except for us. It started as a dare. Let's check out the Thornhill Mansion, my friend Alex suggested one late October evening. The air was crisp with the chill of the approaching winter, and the sunset bathed the house in a strange orange glow. I could see the hesitation in our group's eyes, but no one wanted to back down. It was just a house after all. How bad could it be? We armed ourselves with flashlights, pocket knives, and a Ouija board because, according to Alex, you don't explore an abandoned house without trying to talk to whatever still lives there. The six of us, Alex, Sarah, Mark, Ben, Katie, and I headed toward the towering mansion, its silhouette dark against the fading light. The house was in worse shape up close. The once grand windows were shattered, like eyes hollowed out by time. Ivy crawled up the walls, choking the life out of the rotting wood. The front door hung ajar, creaking in the wind, as though it had been waiting for us. We stepped inside. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating, and smelled of mildew and something else, something metallic. It was darker than we expected. Our flashlights flickered, the beams barely piercing the gloom. Every step we took echoed unnaturally in the empty halls, as if the house itself were alive and listening. The deeper we went, the more the atmosphere changed. Shadows seemed to stretch along the walls, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Strange symbols, carved into the peeling wallpaper, caught our attention. Alex knelt to inspect them, muttering something about witchcraft and old rituals, but we shrugged it off. He was always trying to freak us out. When we found the basement door, a sense of dread swept over us. It wasn't just the darkness below that made us hesitate. It was the feeling that something was down there, waiting. But we'd come this far. As we descended, the temperature dropped dramatically, cold enough for our breath to mist in the air. Our flashlights flickered again. Alex went first, and I followed close behind. At the bottom of the stairs was a large room filled with old, rotting furniture. An ornate mirror hung on wall, strangely out of place among the decay. Katie gasped suddenly. We all turned to her, but she wasn't looking at us. Her eyes were fixed on the mirror. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. None of us had. The mirror was just a mirror, or so we thought. Ben, always the skeptic, walked up to it, tapping the glass with his finger. "It's just an old mirror, Katie," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "See? Nothing." But the moment he stepped away, the mirror changed. The reflection warped, the figures in it twisting and turning. At first, it was subtle, a shadow here, a slight movement there. But then we saw them. Faces, dozens of them, pale, twisted, and staring directly at us. A loud crash behind us made us all jump. The basement door had slammed shut. Panic set in as Mark ran up the stairs, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped, and then the whispering started. At first, it was barely audible, like a distant conversation just out of earshot. But it grew louder, surrounding us, echoing in the cold, empty room. The words were foreign, ancient, a language none of us recognized. The shadows along the walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the whispers, growing darker, deeper. Alex, ever the curious one, placed the Ouija board on an old table in the center of the room. "Maybe they're trying to talk to us," he said, though his hand shook as he set it up. None of us wanted to touch it, but we didn't have a choice. We sat around the table, our fingers resting lightly on the planchette. The moment we asked, "Is anyone here?" the planchette moved violently. It spelled out 3 letters, "Run." We didn't need to be told twice. We scrambled for the stairs, yanking at the door until, miraculously, it opened. We bolted out of the house, never looking back. But here's the thing about that house on Thornhill Road. Once it gets inside you, it never lets go. The next morning, Ben was found dead in his bed. His face twisted into the same grotesque expression we'd seen in the mirror. The news said it was a heart attack, but we knew better. Then, 2 days later, Katie disappeared. No one found a trace of her, as though she'd been wiped from existence. One by one, we started having the same nightmare. In it, we were back in that house, standing in front of the mirror. Our reflections were gone, replaced by those twisted faces we had seen that night. The house wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, and it had marked us. It's still out there, waiting for its next visitors. If you're ever in town and someone dares you to explore the house on Thornhill Road, don't, because once you step inside, it never lets you leave. Not really. There was a house in our town that no one ever spoke about, except in hushed tones. Its most unsettling feature was the blood-red door at the end of the hallway. Every kid in town had heard a version of the same story. Anyone who opened the red door was never seen again. Of course, we didn't believe it. That is, until the night we went inside. It was me, Chloe, Lucas, and Ethan. We'd been hanging out, bored on a Friday night, when Chloe dared us to check out the old house. We laughed it off, but soon enough, we found ourselves standing in front of it. It looked like any other abandoned place peeling paint. Shattered windows, but the red door stood out even in the darkness, like it was waiting for us. We pushed open the front door, the hinges groaning as we stepped inside. The air was cold, too cold for an autumn night, and the hallway stretched longer than it should have, ending in that bright red door. "Let's go," Lucas said, but his voice shook. No one wanted to admit we were scared. We made our way toward the door, our footsteps muffled by the thick, dusty carpet. Every step made my chest tighten, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. Ethan reached the red door first. He grabbed the handle, hesitated, and then, with a smirk, threw it open. The hallway beyond was pitch black. No light, no sound, just an endless void. For a second, none of us moved. But then something shifted inside the darkness, something that breathed. We all heard it, a low, wet inhale, as if something had just woken up. We searched the house for hours, calling out for him. No sign. Nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air. We left the house terrified, but we never told anyone what really happened that night. A week later, Chloe went missing. Then Lucas. Now, it's just me. Every night, I hear a knock at my door. And every night, I know it's coming for me too. The thing from the red door. I can still hear that breath in the darkness. If you ever see a red door in a forgotten house, don't open it. Because once you do, it never closes for good. The house on Briarwood Lane had been empty for decades, but no one could explain why it never sold. A beautiful Victorian home, it had everything: tall windows, sprawling gardens, and a wraparound porch that looked like something out of a painting. But there were stories, dark ones, about the family that once lived there, stories that made people keep their distance. I didn't believe in ghost stories, not until I spent a night inside. It was a dare, of course. Me, Julia, Sam, and Greg, 4 thrill seekers who figured we could handle one night in an old, abandoned house. No big deal. Armed with flashlights, snacks, and sleeping bags, we entered just after sunset. The inside was eerily well preserved, as if the owners had just left one day and never returned. Dust coated everything, but nothing was broken or vandalized. It was too perfect and too quiet. The only sound was the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath our feet. The night began uneventfully enough. We set up camp in the living room, telling ghost stories and laughing about how ridiculous the rumors were. The only thing strange about the place was its emptiness. But then Julia noticed something odd, a door at the end of the hallway that we hadn't seen before. It led to the attic. None of us remembered passing it when we first explored the house, and it hadn't been there earlier. Greg, always the brave one, was the first to head up the narrow staircase. "Let's check it out," he said with a grin, daring us to follow. The attic was huge, stretching across the entire house. Dust particles danced in the beams of our flashlights, and old furniture was stacked haphazardly in the corners. But there was something else, something wrong. The air up there was heavy, thick with the smell of something burnt. At the far end of the attic, we found a small, weathered wooden chest. Its lid was slightly ajar. Greg, curious as always, pulled it open, revealing nothing but old, yellowed papers and photographs. They were of the family who once lived here. Parents, 2 kids, all smiling like they had no idea what was coming. But as Greg shifted the papers, a soft whisper echoed through the attic. "Get out." We all froze. Sam, who had been joking the entire time, went pale. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We nodded. We definitely heard it. Before anyone could move, the door to the attic slammed shut, hard. Julia screamed, and we all bolted for the exit, but the door wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, surrounding us, like dozens of voices speaking at once. Too faint to understand, but unmistakably angry. And then the scratching started. From the walls, the ceiling, the floor, we heard it long, slow scratches, as if something was trying to claw its way out. The beams of our flashlights flickered wildly, casting shadows that danced across the room, shapes that shouldn't have been there. I turned to Greg, but he was no longer standing next to me. He was staring at the old chest, his face blank, his eyes wide with terror. "Don't open it," Julia screamed, but it was too late. Greg, as if in a trance, lifted the lid again. This time, something moved inside, a dark, slithering shape that shouldn't exist. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, filling the attic with a pressure so intense it felt like the walls would burst. Suddenly, the attic door flew open, and we didn't think twice. We ran, stumbling down the stairs, tearing through the hallway and out the front door into the night. The house behind us loomed dark and silent, but the whispers, they followed us. We never found Greg. We called the police, and they searched the house from top to bottom, but he was gone, as if he'd never been there. The house on Briarwood Lane is still empty, and no one goes near it. But I hear the whispers at night, growing louder with each passing day. They want me to come back,